And so they might have missed the little bit that we talked about, right? But here we go. All right, so we looked at this. A statistical report takes information that we have in the form of numbers, usually in the form of statistics, right? Because statistics is information in numbers, and then it turns it into words and sentences. So the goal of that is to help people understand what the numbers are showing, right? So it's to help people see trends, to see patterns, to understand whether there's an increase or decrease, but with words. So maybe that's because they don't have access to the table, or maybe that's because they will understand it clearer through words, whatever it is, right? And we had looked at a graph, and then we had gotten these two examples of what the graph was, of two of the things that the graph was saying. So one of the things the graph was saying is 2021 was the 6th warmest year on record. It was a graph about global temperatures, right? And then the next, one other thing, it was saying a lot of things, but these two were what we picked out, right? And the second thing, the temperature of the earth has increased by 0.08 degrees Celsius every 10 years since 1880. So what something like this helps us to do is to see a trend. We could see that the temperature is going up steadily, right? That mankind is, it's not going down, it's not fluctuating. We are warming the earth steadily, right? So it should help us see that you know, we'll create a problem in the long run, but we get that information from the words which come from the statistics, right? All right, next thing. So another example of statistics written as words. Overall, the company had another excellent year. We shipped 14.3 tons of fertilizer for the year and averaged 1.7 tons of fertilizer during the summer months. This is an increase over last year, where we shipped only 13.1 tons of fertilizer and averaged only 1.4 tons during the summer months. So there was one thing I said that we would not do that this example has done in our statistical reports. Anybody remembers what it is? The paragraph is good except for one little detail. And if you did it, the teacher would take a red pen and put a big mark through it. The opinion, very good. The value judgment. So here, right? Another excellent year. We don't need the value judgment because we don't know for them if it's when you get the table, you will not know if it is an excellent year or not. You will just know the numbers went up or they went down, but we wouldn't really know the context of where it came from. So we cannot put in value judgment. So no opinions in statistical reports, just like in regular reports, right? And instead of this, we would put overall the company increased sales last year, or increased production last year, whatever the table called it, right? Last year. That is what we would say instead. All right. Any questions about that? The other thing we don't put in statistical reports is the reasons for what is being said. So we wouldn't put, for instance, why the sales or the amount increased. We wouldn't say, well, we got cheaper raw materials, or we had more resources, or we were able to cut costs because we got new machinery, right? We wouldn't say that. Are you writing this down? Well, you probably would have written it down last week. And if you didn't, you would get it from the video for last week. So I'm just reviewing what we talked about, and then you'll have other notes for today, right? This idea will come up again. So it's okay to not write it down now, right? All right. So I'm clearing and we're going to another screen. Oh, one other thing I want to point out that we will cement again just now, right? But you see how they put the numbers? They say 14.3 tons of fertilizer and 1.7 tons of fertilizer. And then they say, okay, well, this is an increase. And then they give the last year's numbers to show they were smaller. So in between saying the numbers on the chart, we are going to put what they show. Was it an increase, a decrease, a fluctuation, whatever, right? And we will come back and do this example just now. But a reminder that these were some of the words that we use in statistical reports. So to show something becoming more, we have increased growth, accelerated upward trend. To show something going down, we have decrease, shrinking downward, trend, slump. To show that it remains the same or unchanged, it doesn't change, so we have remain the same, we have unchanged, we have stable, we have plateau. Did it fluctuate? So we have fluctuated. Then we have other adjectives to say how the change took place. Was it rapid, sharp, slow, gradual, steep, slight, dramatic, more dramatically, inconsistent, and so on, right? All right. So now, if for some reason you did not write these down last week, I'm going to give us 2 minutes now to write them down, but only 2 minutes, right? And if 2 minutes is not enough, then you'll have to screenshot it. How would we use dramatically? Well, if you could say something increased dramatically, right? And you know what we could add here? We could add some numbers, some words for numbers. So we could say by the adjectives. So even if you have it from last week, you could add it now. Doubled, tripled, right? You could say decreased by half. You could also say halved. That's a word, right? A verb, right? You could say twice the size of, or twice the amount of. All right, so remember that you also have these words available to you. All right, so 2 minutes. And then we're going to go back to the graph and we're going to make some observations, but we will need these words to make the observations. All right, so make sure you have the words in front of you before we go back to the graph. So 2 minutes. Okay, so we're going to the next slide. I'm counting to 10. If you didn't finish, you need to screenshot, right? All right, and we're going to the next slide. So we're going back to the graph. Now let's see what we have here. We have some different lines, right? The title of the graph is GDP per capita. So gross domestic product per capita. So it's basically how much money people have earned. Like if you take if you think of the economy of the country and you consider all the money that the country makes, right? And then you divide it by the number of people in the country, that's our GDP per capita. So for instance, in, well, let's take the US, they're at the top. In 2008, for each person in the country, there was an average of $31,000 made, right? Anybody unclear on what that means? If you're unclear on it, you need to tell me and I'll try explaining it again. But I think that this is something people are fairly familiar with. All right, so let's take Trinidad, right? How many people are in Trinidad? How many people live in Trinidad? Oh, 1.4 million. All right, so let's say 1.4 million in Trinidad. I was thinking 1.3, but it's probably maybe 1.4 by now. So let's go with 1.4 million people in Trinidad, right? If of that, like not everybody will be working, some will be children, some will be retired people. So let's say of that 1 million people work. And that 1 million, like everybody gets a different salary per month. Some people might be unemployed, so some months they may not get a salary. Some people might be self-employed. Everybody gets a different salary, right? Let me see, what was Trinidad's GDP together? So all together, how much money you think that 1.4 million, our 1.4 million population is bringing into the economy? Thoughts? So like everybody who's selling in a parlor, or teachers, well, no teachers, well, all right, yeah. Or people who are exporting things. How much we think? $1 billion. All right, if I look at it, I put in for 2020, it is actually 21.53 billion US dollars, right? So the whole country going into the country's bank account, which is that we pretend everybody have a shared bank account, right? Which we don't, we know that. But let me pretend if everybody had a shared bank account, this is the amount we would be bringing in. This is the amount we brought in 2020, right? Yeah, I'm not typing on the screen, I'm typing in the chat, right? So to get the per capita, you would take the 21.53 billion, and it's usually calculated in US, so you could figure out how to compare it, right? So you see 21.53 billion US, and you divide it by the 1.4 million people, right? So per capita actually means per person, and GDP is actually an amount of money, right? So it's a theoretical number because obviously the amount of money is not equally shared up amongst people, right? So I don't even know why economists think this is a good measure, but I teach English, not economics, so you'll have to ask the econ teachers, right? So this per capita, right? GDP is money. Now I'm writing on the screen just to make sure we understand it. And per capita means per person, right? All right. So what we have on the screen then is a measure of how much money, what is the GDP per capita per person for these different countries in the different years. So if the economy is growing, then the numbers will go up. And if the economy is shrinking, the numbers will go down. Now, in any of these, are the numbers going up? I mean, sorry, are the numbers going down? Which one we think has a number going down? It starts from over here, 1700, and it goes up. Who has the highest? Which country is making the most money? The USA, we could see that, right? And which country is making the least money? India. Okay, so let's take those two very basic observations first, and let's write those down. So our goal here is to make a list of observations from the graph in words that we could then use to put together and organize to make a statistical report, right? That is our goal. So the first step is to make observations. So we are explaining the chart in words. So I would like you all to write these down as we go, right? So we can call this practice exercise. Right? Your heading could be practice exercise. Now I will have to erase after a while to get more space, right? So first thing, the country with the highest GDP per capita is the USA. And what is its GDP per capita? In 2008, it was about, let me say, what is that? Maybe 31,000. All right, so that is the first example of how we could take a statistic and write it in words, right? Now, the thing at the end, the 2008-31,000, we're going to put that into the report as a sentence. So I'm just putting the numbers here now to help us make sense of it, right? So, okay, so take down the first one, and then you all try to explain what you're seeing when you look at India. We said that India had the smallest amount of money coming in, the lowest amount of money. So how would we explain in a sentence what the graph shows about India? After you've taken out the example, see if you can put it in the chat. All right, the country with the lowest GDP per capita is India. And in 2008, they had about 3,000. Okay, good. Thank you. Right? So I'm going to write that down. That will be our second thing. All right. So Adam is noting the trends of what is happening over the years, right? So we will come, excuse me, we'll come to that just now, right? What does GDP mean in the long term? People in business, and people in business, you could correct me if I have it wrong, right? But people in business and economists and so on for countries use it as an indicator to see if the country as a whole is growing and doing well economically or kind of struggling. All right, so the second, oops, come back here, slide, what you doing? All right, so the second slide. Oops, so many things with this. All right, so the country with the lowest GDP per capita oopsie, sorry. GDP does appear, right? Per capita is India, right? And the numbers are 2008. And if you look here, you see this is 2008. 3,000. About 3,000, right? That's what it means. All right. So now we are looking at, since I started us off looking at like the years and the amounts, how could we explain what is going on with the UK, Japan, Germany, and then with China? Maybe China might be the easiest to describe first. So India, okay, no. China is or has the second lowest GDP. And I'll check the chart just now, right? Sorry, guys, one sec. All right, so China has the second lowest GDP, and that amount is about maybe 7,000 in 2008, right? Okay, so I want you all to think about, and this is a hard question, so think about it while you know, after you know these three. How could we explain what we are seeing with the UK, Japan, and Germany? What is happening with the three of them? GDP, I believe, stands for gross domestic product, right? But again, this is English class. We're just looking at a graph. All right, so UK, Japan, Germany. In 2008, where are they? What is going on with the three of them? Are they far apart? Are they close together? It's higher than China and India for sure, yeah. They're close together. Right, because they're between 20 and 25,000. Germany might be 21, and Japan and the UK look like they might be 20, 23, 24. Right, the UK has the second highest GDP 2008, about 24,000, right? All right. Okay, so there are different ways you could note what you're seeing, right? You could say the UK has the second highest GDP, and then talk about Japan and Germany. You could say the UK and Japan and Germany are very close together in terms of GDP, as both of them are between 20 and 25,000. Or you could say they're very close together in terms of GDP, and you could say Germany has 21, Japan has 23, and the UK has 24, right? So I think I'm going to go with the last one. Okay, so the UK, Japan, and Germany have GDPs that are very close together, right? And in brackets, again, this is 2008 that we're looking at. And I will put, so because I have UK, then Japan, and Germany, I'll put the numbers for UK first, which is about 24,000. Then Japan, which is about 23,000. And then Germany, which is about 21,000, right? So the numbers match back to the original country. Okay, so let's note these, and then I will clear the screen and we will discuss it. Yes, so if you're comparing, let me say India and China to UK and Japan and Germany, Tanisha is suggesting we use language like there's a huge gap between, or those three have far surpassed China and India, yeah, you could do that. And you could say the USA has far surpassed China and India, or even there's a gap between, a considerable gap between UK, Japan. All of that is good language, right? But we're just trying to see what we observe, what stands out to us on the chart. So let's make sure we have all of these noted. I have to note them too, because we want to be able to try and write piece of a report soon, right? Like in a later slide. So let's write down what we didn't write down, and then think about the overall trend for each country. So you look back from 1700 to 2008, and what is the overall trend? Okay. Anybody still writing? I can erase this so we get more space. Okay, so if you're still writing, I could give you maybe 1 more minute. Remember, you could shorten it too, right? Just make sure you have a general point. These are just observations. We are going to write a report. So we want to have the observations in front of us, because we won't be able to go back and forth, right? So I'm not going to unmute anyone. So if you have a question, you could put it in the chat, right? All right, guys, I need to move on. So I'm going to count to 10 and then erase the screen, right? Okay. All right. So we want to make some more observations. Look at the lines and tell me what you notice about them in terms of like the overall change. So all of the lines are showing an increase, huh? And guys, actually the lines are not showing a decrease. Let me just clarify that. Some people are telling me there's a decrease. Look at the GDP. I'm changing the screen just to show you something. GDP for Trinidad. I did 2020 just now. Let me find 2020 again. You see this line, this blue line? That's us. So Trinidad actually has a high GDP, right? It's just our wealth is poorly distributed. It's not evenly distributed throughout the population. Okay, so you'll notice it was going up. So, and then it gets up in 1980, it's high, and then it comes back down. Well, compared to what it was 20 years before, right? Comes down and starts to increase again. The highest it's been is in, what year is this? 2009, maybe, right? When it was like 26 or 27. Oh, that's 2008, my bad, right? So that is a peak, and then you see how it drops. It's like it will go up a mountain, you come down. That is 2009. That is a drop. The line has to come down. Okay, so it goes up again to, and this is 2014, right? And then it starts to come down again. That is a decrease. So by 2016 and even in 2015, right, it's lower. If the number is lower than what it was before, that is a decrease, right? So when we look at our graph, I don't think we actually have a decrease. If it were a decrease, then let's say here, the line would have to come down and then go back up. Same for all of these, right? So what is really happening is not a decrease. What is happening instead? Anybody could explain it in the chat? Like what happens between 2003 and 2008 in the US? That's not a decrease. It's still an increase, but what is the change that people are noticing? Oh, okay, right. Correction. For Germany, there is a decrease. But wait, explain this to me first. Between 2003 and 2008, for USA, what is happening there? It's higher, yes, but you're noticing the line is not as steep. Like if you were climbing a mountain, that part of the mountain wouldn't be as hard to climb because it's not as steep. So it's an increase, but it's a more gradual increase. So the rate of increase slows down, right? It's not as steep an increase. All right, good. Okay, so now let's talk about, so I was wrong. There is actually a decrease on the map, on the graph, sorry, and it's with Germany, right? So the decrease is over here. And if you all think there's another piece that I'm missing, you could tell me. But let me just highlight to make it clear that this is the decrease. Here, this part here, where Germany goes down between 1935 and 1950. Anybody knows what's happening in Germany at that time, 1935 to 1950? What's going on in Germany at that time? Some of the history students might know. Yeah, World War II, right. So their resources going to the war. Well, first they were going through a depression, and which is kind of what led to contributed to Hitler's popularity, what he was saying, and then as a way to cope with the depression. And then they go into the war, and then they come out of the war, and they have a whole lot of sanctions for the stupidness that they did during the war. So anyhow, all right, y'all are telling me Japan too has a slight decrease. Where y'all seeing a decrease in Japan? 1935 to 1950, that's what we're thinking of. Somebody gave us a word last week that starts with a P. Okay, it could be a slight decrease, but there's another word that could fit in there. It starts with a P. A plateau, right? So you could describe what happens in 1935 to 1950 as kind of a plateau. It does look like a little bit like it's decreasing, but because we don't have the numbers to go with it, and we have to kind of interpret. Yeah. All right. So we wanted to say what the overall trend is. So overall, what's happening with the countries? Most countries show what kind of increase from 1700 to 1935. All the countries, actually, I would say, show this kind of, what kind of increase is that? From 1700 to 1935. What kind of increase are they showing? Slow or gradual? Good, right? All right, so that's all. We continue with our observations. This is number, what number observation is that? Number 5 now. All right, so I'm looking at the time, it's 12:17. We will finish off the observations, and then we will take a short break, and when we come back, actually write the report, right? Okay, so number 5, the countries showed a gradual increase from 1700 to 1935. Right? Increase in GDP per capita. Right? That's the first one. In general, what happens then from 1935 to, let me say, 2003? What happens from 1935 to 2003? A steep increase, right? Okay, this word up here is showed, right? Okay, so 6 from 1935 to 2003. GDP is increased steeply, right? And of course, you could word it differently. You could say they showed a steep increase, or there was a sharp increase, right? With the exception of, who's the exception again? Germany, right? So with the exception of Germany, whose economy declined now, no, the graph doesn't say economy, but GDP means economy, right? From 1935 to 1950. Or we can say slightly, because it's a slight decline, right? Slightly from 1935 to 1950. All right, and then we need to account for from about 2003 to 2008 showed a gradual, okay, so number 5, I'm just reading it back. The country showed a gradual increase in GDP per capita from 1700 to 1935, right? And then from 1935 to 2003, GDPs increased steeply, with the exception of Germany, whose economy, now I probably want to write a report, I'll change whose because Germany is not a person, right? But just to get the idea out, I put whose economy declined slightly from 1935 to 1950. All right, one more observation to get us to the end of to 2008, right? We could say they continue to increase, right? Nobody went down after 2003, right? So economies continue to grow at a slower rate from 2003 to 2008, right? So, let's say, okay, so GDP per capita instead of economies again continued to increase. The word after Germany in number 6 is whose, W-H-O-S-E. And I explained I will probably change that when we write the report, right? Because it's not a person, it really shouldn't be whose. So it continued to increase at a slower rate until 2008, right? Okay, then there's one more thing I want us to do, one more observation, and then we could stop for a short break, right? So, and the last thing is, in one sentence, can you say what this chart is showing? In one sentence, what would we say the chart is showing, right? So you could note your 5 to 7, and then you could put in the chat what you think the chart is showing. And that's the last thing we're going to do. Then we'll take a break. So I'm giving us a few minutes. I have to write them down too. So I'll have them in front of me when we're doing the report. In one sentence, I'm putting this in the chat. What is the chart showing? I know I'm not asking about increase or decrease here, right? I'm just asking what is this a chart of? So it might, this sentence that we're coming up with might be like an opening sentence in your report. So the chart shows X, Y, and Z for X, Y, and Z for the period X, Y, and Z, right? So think along those lines. So copy 5 to 7 and then try and put a sentence in the chat for what you think the chart is showing, like a title, but in words. All right, so a lot of sentences are coming in good. Right, and so because they're coming in kind of fast, I can't respond to all, right? Let me, so just a general comment, a couple people have it perfectly, and a lot of us have to edit a little bit. So look at the one I just put in the chat. Our record of GDP per capita during the years of 1700 to 2008 between the countries of USA, UK, Germany, China, India, and Japan, right? So that's a good one. It needs to be tweaked a little bit, right? Let me just, I am almost done writing this down. I have the last point to note, and then we will talk about it. But remember that you have to put in, we can't just say countries because it's not all the countries in the world on this chart. There are a few selected ones. Okay, you also cannot say between specific countries or selected countries. You have to say which ones. Yeah, we have to say which ones. Obviously, it's selected countries, but you remember, it's not going to help anybody understand which countries if we just say selected countries, right? Okay, so I'm going to clear the screen now. I'm going to count to 10. If anybody didn't finish writing the notes, take a screenshot. All right, so let's write down what we have as an option. The graph shows the GDP per capita. Now that's what it says on the graph, so that is what I'm going to put in, right? For the countries of and I need to put all, and it would make sense if I put them in the order that they appear on the graph, right? Rather than change the order. So the unless there's some other reason to change the order, like you're going from greatest to smallest, but that is the order it's in on the graph, right? We don't need to alphabetize it or anything. So the countries of the USA, UK, and if you want, you could write out what they mean. United States of America. Actually, that would probably be better. So when we do the report, we might write it out. Japan, Germany, China, and India. For, oops. You could also order it the opposite way. Yeah? You could go from lowest from India to the top if you want. All right. I don't think we should title the history of anything because the graph doesn't say it's the history of anything. For instance, we don't know if it's possible that 1700 is when they first came up with GDP, or that's what they have information for, but we don't know that for sure. Right? And also it stops at 2008, it doesn't go up to 2021. So history implies like complete, but this is not complete. All right, USA, UK, Japan, Germany, China, and India. So for the period 1700 to 2008, right? All right, so it says 12:30 now. Make a note of this sentence because that's what we will probably start the report with. And then you could go ahead and take 5 minutes. So let's plan to start back at 12:40, right? 12.40. Okay, and if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. So the main purpose is to present information given as numbers in words. All right, so present in words, to present in words information that was given as numbers. Right? And why do we do this? Right? This is in order to help people see important pieces of information that they might need to use to realize something, right? So this is to help people see information that might be important. Right? And the examples are, you see all those words that we've been using, the highest, the lowest, patterns, trends. Well, a trend is a pattern, right? Frequency, how often something is happening or how often is not happening, whatever. Right? Because when we could track those things, we might be able to see things and make changes. Or we might realize there's a problem, or we might realize that something is working on well, or not working at all, or whatever, right? So numbers are just information, but when we could turn it into words and ideas, then they become, numbers are just data, raw data. When we could turn it into words and ideas, they become information, that's something you could use, right? All right. How do we write one? It needs to be organized. It needs to be organized like anything else that you write. So it must have an introduction, a body, a conclusion, right? So the structure, introduction, body, with at least 2 paragraphs. Personally, when I'm writing statistical reports, I don't try for CSEC practice. I don't try to put more than 2 paragraphs, 2 body paragraphs into the report, right? If you have enough information for a third and you have enough words for a third, then by all means do a third, right? And a conclusion, right? So just like anything else that you write, a letter, an email, a report, an essay, any other nonfiction thing that you write, it must have that structure of introduction, body, and conclusion, right? Okay, so let me make this a little bigger and we'll continue. We'll just talk a little bit about what goes into each part, and then I'll give you time to write this down. All right, so the introduction, a good thing to put in your introduction is what does the graphic show, right? And I'm saying graphic, it could be a graph, it could be a pie chart, it could be a table. What does the graphic or table show, right? However, it refers to itself, that's how you refer to it. So what does it show? And the last sentence that we wrote, that is what our graphic shows, our graph shows, right? So what does the graphic or table show? And then a kind of a thesis, what will follow in your report? And in what order? Right? Okay, so that's our introduction. Then our body. Oh, what is this? Right? So the body is the next thing. Are we trying to have 2 paragraphs? At least 2 paragraphs, each with a different main idea. Right? And then a conclusion. Okay, so overall, what did the statistical report show? Right? That is generally what we are doing. Okay, so the first thing, the first part on top is the purpose. And how to write it, the structure that's below, right? So take a few minutes, add this to your notes, and then we will continue by actually writing one together, right? And yes, you will need it as an example. Okay, so let's go ahead, let's add this to our notes. Hi guys, all right, so for me to make it bigger, I have to put it on slideshow, which I will do now. So the screen will shift for a minute, and then, right? That's the largest I can make it. Right. A couple of people are finished. Some of us are still writing. Okay, if anyone is still writing, you need to let me know. All right, so just let's try 2 more minutes and then you'll let me know if we can move on. Guys, one other thing I do want to say is is that when you are writing your statistical report, you need to find a way to turn it into a narrative, right? Now, I don't want to say story because then people will think fiction. And because it's a report, you have to stick with what you're given, right? So I'm using the word narrative. A narrative puts things together in a kind of an order that makes sense to the reader, right? It might be from beginning to end, like if things happen chronologically, or it might be from smallest to biggest or biggest to least. There are different ways that we order things as human beings in our minds in the English language, right? So I do want to add this in here now that we're saying it, now that I'm saying it, right? So there's one more thing to note. A statistical report makes a narrative out of the statistics. So after you write it, it must make sense to the reader as to why you put it in that order. So you might not put it in the order the things occur to you, the observations occur to you. You might not put it in the order it is on the table or the graph, but you'll put it in an order that doesn't change the information and that would help make sense to the reader. Right? All right, so I'm muting myself again. Let's take 2 minutes and see if we can finish up in that time. All right, anybody still writing? Okay, so let me just go back to the word narrative for a minute, right? And then after that, you'll need to screenshot, right? So I'll give you a warning when you have 10 seconds after screenshot it if you need to, right? But when I said the report takes the statistics and it puts them into a narrative, right? What I mean is it kind of puts them into a story for the reader to read and make sense of, right? But I don't want to use it with story because then people might get confused. A story is made up, but the statistics have to be what is in front of you, okay? So when I say narrative, I mean they have to put them together in a particular order. All right, guys, why am I getting so many questions about when class is finishing? Class usually finishes, I usually let us out around 12:20, right? So in about 20 minutes, we should be done. Right, so some way for the reader to understand, right? That might mean that you decide, okay, I'll give them the information in the order of time that it happens. Like you'll talk about, if you think about a graph, what happened in 1700 and then 2000 and then 2008. Or you might give them the information in terms of which are the larger numbers and then which are the smaller numbers. You could choose, right? But just remember what we are trying to do, and it's hard, we wouldn't get it the first try probably, right? But what we're trying to do is put together something like well, a nonfiction story, right? All right, so I'm counting to 10 and then I have to change this slide so we could write a report together. All right, so take a screenshot if you didn't as yet. Yeah, like an informative report. Like when you tell a report, when you write a report on an incident, you usually put the details in the order that they happened, right? Like that, but not necessarily in the order that something happened. Yeah, it could be chronological. It could be in the order that it happened, but it might not be, right? Like for our graph, we might not put it chronologically because that goes all the way back to 1700 and nobody cares in this context, right? For this exercise. All right, so we're moving on now. Let's go actually write our report. Okay, so I have to exit slideshow mode. We did this just now. We combined it with the other thing. Okay, so let's write our report in here. Actually, we don't have the observations, but we're right next to the graph, right? So sample report. Okay. We are starting with the last sentence that we came up with, right? So the graph shows the GDP per capita for the countries of the USA. Let's actually write all the words, United States of America, because when we are writing formally, we should not use abbreviations, right? United Kingdom, so that's Britain, right? Japan, Germany, China, and India. Right? Okay, so that's our introduction. Below the major trends. Oh wait, what did I leave out from the first sentence? I put in GDP per capita and I put in countries. What did I leave out? What else does the graph show? Right, yes, for the period 1700 to 2008. Right, that has to be in there. Now, I said in the introduction, we, so this is the first thing we're writing, right? Introduction. What does the graphic or the table show? So we did that. And the next part is a thesis sentence. What will follow in the report and in what order? Right? Okay, so below the major trends are highlighted. Right? Now, it doesn't matter what statistical report you have to do, what table you have, what pie chart, what a bar graph, what histogram, whatever. This sentence could work as a thesis sentence for any statistical report, I think. You could tweak it a little bit. So if you know to say that you're going to talk about increases and decreases, you could write that. If the graph is about men and women and literacy, you could say that the major trends for men are highlighted, followed by the major trends for women, right? So this is a good general thesis sentence here. This is our thesis. And this is our example of an opening sentence here, right? All right, let's continue. So I'm going to skip a line because I'm starting a new paragraph and I didn't indent. I'm using block format. So I'm skipping a line in between paragraphs, right? Okay, now you all tell me. We had two sets of observations. One had to do with the highs and lows of the GDP, and one set had to do with what is happening over the different periods of time. We identified basically 3 different periods of time on the chart. One where everything was gradual, one where everything was steep, and one where everything was less steep, more gentle, more gradual. What do you all want to discuss first? Do we want to discuss the highs and the lows, or do we want to discuss the overall trends? Thoughts? All right, I have 2 votes for highs and lows, 1 for overall. Anybody else want to weigh in? 2 for overall? Okay. What are the any particular reason you might say highs and lows first, or any particular reason you might say overall first? All right. Well, I think you can make the argument for either one, honestly. You just have to make sure after you write it that it makes sense. All right, so let's try. I think we have more votes for highs and lows, so let's do that one first. So the highest, well, okay, no, I should have a topic sentence. I don't have one in mind yet. We'll come back and put it in. So if you are writing, please wait before you write this paragraph because we have to come back and put in a topic sentence, right? So the highest GDP per capita. No, it's 2008 we're dealing with, right? So let me say that. Most recently, in 2008, right? The highest GDP per capita was recorded for the US. USA. All right, I need to put in, it was $31,000, right? So I could say this was 31,000 US, or I could say per capita, the highest GDP per capita of 31,000 US. US dollars, right, was recorded for the USA. Right? And then we go after that, we did lowest, right? Now, should we go from high to low, or should we go in order of high and then the next set and then go to the lowest? What would make more sense? Yeah, it might make, okay, so a lot of times people put highs and lows together. It might make more sense if we're trying to, if we're only doing highs and lows, you could say highs and lows, right? But since we are going to talk about all the countries, it might help people understand if we go from USA to UK, Japan, Germany, and then to China, and then to India, right? All right. Don't write the paragraph as yet. Let's just finish this off. I'll put in a topic sentence and then you can write the introduction, but not the body paragraph. Well, unless you don't mind coming back and putting in a missing sentence at the beginning. If you want, skip a line, an extra line for it, and then you could do it. But we have to come back and put a topic sentence, right? All right. So let's go. The next ones were UK, Japan, Germany, right? So the UK, Japan, and Germany had similar GDPs per capita, right? In 2008. With 24,000. I'm not putting two commas, that might get confusing, right? Then the other one was 23,000. Now notice since the numbers are big, I am not writing them out in words. Once a number is above 10, you could write out the figure. 21,000 respectively. Right? So once I use the word respectively, it means you share it up in the order it's given. So 24,000 for the UK, 23,000 for Japan, 21,000 for Germany, right? And then we come to the lowest. So China had the second lowest figure. I'm tired of writing GDP per capita, so I'm going to say lowest figures, right? With 7,000 in 2008, and India had lowest figure with 3,000 in the same year, right? All right. Now, instead of just going into the details of the paragraph, I should have a topic sentence that says what the paragraph will be about. Right? So, what does the paragraph show? Different countries produced different figures right? And then that is what it has shown, right? Can we say with India being the first lowest figure of country with 3,000 the same year? I don't think we would need to say first. If it's lowest, then it's just lowest. With 3,000 the same year. But so if you take out the first, then that could work, right? All right, so I'm going to make this bigger for anybody who needs to write it down. Now, one thing we didn't write, but we certainly could have written, is that overall, the USA had the highest GDP for the entire period, right? This was followed by the UK, Japan, Germany, and then China, and then India had the lowest for the entire period, right? We could have talked about the entire period and what we observed. Yes, we could say both China and India had low GDPs, with India being the lowest and with China being the second lowest. Yeah, we could say that. right? There are lots of different ways to put across the information, right? But you're just trying to think of a way that will make sense to the reader. Because if you just tell the reader a bunch of numbers, they're not going to retain it. We need some kind of frame. We need to know, okay, well, this was the highest number, this was the lowest number. And honestly, this is why sometimes studying is hard, because we don't have a frame for the information we're trying to memorize. If you could make up a frame, so think of, I hope you're all writing while I'm talking, right? And you could ignore me if this is irrelevant to your life. But like, if you think of history and how in history, you have to remember a whole bunch of different reasons for why something happened. It might help if you are able to make up a story to help you remember the different things that happen, right? All right, guys, so I'm muting myself to let you take this down. And then depending on how much time we have, we will continue, right? Most of I try to get through is a conclusion. All right, how are we doing? Anybody need more time? If you need more time, you have to say, right, guys? All right, so I'm just gonna go to a conclusion. Let me duplicate this slide here. Right, I know statistical reports are not the easiest thing to write. So we just want to make sure we know how to do it in case we get asked to do it, right? And of course, when you go out into the real world, you may need to write them there, like for work and businesses and so on, right? Or if you work for a newspaper, and and there are lots of different reasons. So let's talk about what a conclusion could be. So to conclude, it's a short report, so we're not going to repeat anything that we said, hopefully, right? If we had more time, we would do another body paragraph. And the other body paragraph would have in there what we talked about with the how the increases went, right? So actually I could put that in. Let me just put it in, right? Short, and I'll just write fast, and then you can take it down or screenshot it at the end. So countries showed an overall increase for the entire period, right? From 1700 to 1935, the increase was gradual, right? From 1935 to 2003, what did we see? GDP is per capita. Notice the S goes by the GDP, yeah? Increased steeply, except for Germany. Okay, and Risha suggested instead of the who's, we put where. So yeah, Germany is a place, we could say where. All right, where the economy declined slightly, because it's a slight dip, from 1935 to 1950, right? Following this, the GDP is for all countries increased at a slower rate until 2008, right? Wait, no, hold on. Following the steep increase in to 2003. Is that it? No, the steep increase to, when was the steep increase until? To 2003, right? So because if I say following this, it sounds like Germany, following Germany, right? So following the steep increase to 2003, the GDPs for all countries increased at a slower rate until 2008. Right. Okay, so we clear on why I said that, and then a conclusion, right? So a conclusion could be overall, as shown or as seen, the country with the highest GDP per capita was the USA, while the country with the lowest was India, right? The UK, Japan, and Germany follow the US. While China's figures remained close to India's, right? And I'm sure this comes as a conclusion. It might be a next body paragraph, right? So the graphic shows the various GDPs for the specified countries. Now that we've said what the countries were, you could say specified or specific countries. Right? From 1700 to, or for a period of 300, how many years is history? About approximately 300 years. Or 3 centuries. So now 3 is a sentence, so I'll write the word 3, right? And major trends have been discussed above. Okay, so personally, I feel like this thing with the overall increase and overall, except for Germany and things, should be the first body paragraph, right? But I don't think CSEC would penalize you if it wasn't. All CSEC is checking for, you have an intro, you have a conclusion, and you have 40 paragraphs with main ideas in each one. They don't care if you put this above the other one or the other one above this or whatever. School teacher might, but not CSEC, right? Okay, so any questions? Anything anybody want to talk about? Remember, this is our last class for summer. And I'm just going to put up the timetable for September briefly. A lot of y'all would already have seen it. I'm also pausing the recording here. Right? Remember,